All right, we're going.
All right, so we're just discussing the origins of Luscious Lima and the time frame in which then Captain Quinn took command of Lima Company and what command climate he set.
Yeah, this is one of the things I did purposefully. This is, it is proper to be humble when you've got a lieutenant like Larson or Watson. Things that we achieve together, a lot of times it originates with them, and I just reinforce it, and that's my role. Here's an example of something, though, that I did by myself on purpose, and it worked great. Coming off the Al-Qaeda deployment, I took command basically the last day we were deployed in Iraq. I took command in the logistics hub as we were flying out. Unpopular with some people because the change of command didn't happen where my family could see it or whatever, but that got me credibility with the Marines, that they saw that I was in the country with them. They didn't even understand I was in the 3 shop prior.
Okay, just as an aside, well, actually, Lieutenant Colonel Lopez made that decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in a previous interview, Captain Neal had noted that he had sometimes had changes of command on Harley motorcycles.
Yes, Colonel Lopez basically didn't give a hoot about anything unless he thought about it and agreed with it. In other words, I'm sure he had some things he was robotic about, like you should have a haircut once a week. That's just military stuff. But he wanted me to take command in Iraq because, in this case, Captain Neal had been there a long time. We needed to get him moving for B-billet, but a different guy would have waited to have the change of command out of some perceived loyalty to my wife or something, so she could have witnessed the change of command. No, he put me in command in Iraq, got me credibility with the Marines, and by the time my peers took command, it was November 17th. That was 2 months later. So it had practical benefits. And the principle I'm getting at is simply this: question all assumptions. That sounds bad discipline or countercultural or whatever. Well, I think you need to be countercultural if your culture is 3rd generation. Some assumptions you're going to question and find them valid. The way it's been historically done, 1 haircut a week, that's valid. But changes of command, certain days, maybe not valid. This really isn't a change of command story, though. It's a Luscious Lima story, and here's how that plays out. I could sense leaving Husaybah, leaving the Al-Qaeda deployment, that the Marines were very, very bitter. They were bitter because they were practicing tactics that they didn't believe in, and they knew to be stupid, but none of us at that time could really put our hands on what the right tactic was. A quick example is the counterinsurgency doctrine talks about necessity to get out in town and maintain coverage in town. So we would literally, from the regiment, I can say this because I was in the operations shop, we would be required to report, like on graphically, how many hours a day we had achieved patrols. And the goal was, at any point, I should be able to look at a timeline on the top. And as I go down the timeline, I should see multiple bars, meaning at every hour of the day, I had multiple patrols out in town. Practically what that turned into was Marines just walked around until IEDs blew up, and that was called an IED sweep. Now clearly, Colonel Lopez, that's not what he ordered, you know what I mean? But there's a great challenge between what you say and then how it plays out, and Colonel Lopez was always out the gate. Well, you need to be, because you've got to see how that stuff's playing out. So despite his talents, despite our flexibility, Al-Qaeda was just a tough deployment. The Sunnis just had to fight, and we were on the beginning of the bow wave, and relatively little of Mines' tactics would have worked then. Coming off the deployment, that's hard to deal with. So the Marines are really bitter. There's been a lot of Marines hurt, killed, and basically for no good reason, in the Marines' opinion. The situation hadn't changed. They don't understand that we're only a third of the way through the fight period, right, before the virgin opportunity will present itself again. So I realized I needed to do something to show that I wasn't just a robotic thinker. So, Lightning Lima, Lucky Lima, like what name are you going to use for your company or whatever? Well, I challenged guys to think of a different one, and Gunnar Karp was actually the one. Gunnar Carpenter, he was Gunny Carpenter back then, came up with Luscious, and he said it as a joke, thinking that no one would ever take him up on it. And there's something instinctively I sensed that to go by Luscious Lima, there would have to be some masculine aspect to it, because Luscious is too feminine, But if we could do this, it would be totally countercultural. And then when I said to the Marines, I will not send you on an IED sweep, but I may need you to go clear a particular area one time. If a VIP is coming through the next day, or if there's a, you know, I could sense that we were close. And then we tried to think, well, what would luscious, what could we use to represent it? We needed something masculine. Gunner Karp comes up with the Rolling Stone lips, which even though they're lips, it's the Rolling Stones. You know, now I may be dating myself a bit, but that's kind of badass. You know, you Beast of Burden, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. I mean, there's things that can appeal to a man. So we went with it. We printed a big Luscious Lima lips up on the wall. I had one of my Marines tag it, you know, where you write it in a very confusing way. Yeah, so, you know, that's not really going to sit well in the battalion. Now, I understood this would happen, but I told Colonel Lopez what I was doing. I don't think he really, like, dug it, but he didn't negate it. And I know some guys didn't like it, you know, Sergeant Major in particular, I think. But it started to create the sense in the company that...
What about Gunny Bay?
Well, that's right up Gunny Bay's alley. I mean, Gunny Bay runs in sandals because if it's good enough for the Lord, it's good enough for me, right? I mean, like battalion runs. One of the worst ass chewings I ever got from Colonel Lopez was, I guess they had done this historically. Now, from my perspective, it's the first time I've ever seen it. But Colonel Lopez had addressed this in months past, and when Gunny Bay went running in Tivas,